Hello, my name is Caitlin Heredia, and welcome to a roundtable discussion hosted by Black World, Stony Brook University student media that provides a voice for Black and Latino communities on campus. Um, First and foremost, I'd like to thank all of you that were able to come and join us for our discussion today. You can all introduce yourselves now.
Hi everyone, my name is Esther Alatishe. I go to Stony Brook and I'm majoring in political science with minors in history and international studies.
Hello everyone, my name is Anthony Haynes. I'm a part of Black World as well, and I go to Stony Brook University and I'm currently undeclared.
Hello, everybody. My name is Julio Taku. I'm a student also at Stony Brook University. I'm a journalism major with an AFS minor, and I am also the business executive of the Stony Brook Press.
Hey everyone, my name is Catherine Heredia. I go to Stony Brook University. I'm a journalism major, and I'm also a sister of Omega Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated.
Hello, everybody. My name is Brianna Glover. I go to Bard College and I'm a sociology major.
Thank you guys for introducing yourselves, and I'll just introduce our topic that we're going to be discussing today. So most of us already know about the case of Gabby Petito. Coverage of her story has been all over the United States. She was 22 years old, and she was a white woman who went missing in September in the state of Wyoming. She was said to be traveling and blogging with her then boyfriend and fiance, Brian Laundrie, and unfortunately her body was found in her van. But basically what we're talking about today is just how that media output of that, it sparked a lot of attention or about the lack of coverage for missing and Indigenous, Black and brown people and women all over the country. So there was a noticeable disparity, and why do you guys think that is? Any you guys would like to start?
Well, I think it's clear to see that the reason why Gabby Petito got so much coverage versus, Black and brown, Hispanic, Indigenous women is because she's white, and we I feel like not we, but society puts more value on the lives of white women.
Yeah, I was just to add to that, I would say media coverage, it's a business, so it's going to reflect what its audience wants. And yeah, we put societally, white women are put to a higher standard in terms of value, or not a higher standard, but they are valued more. I remember during the time of the case, I would hear so many people talking about it around me. Culturally, there was so much interest in the story, which I couldn't really imagine happening for a non-white woman.
I remember scrolling through Instagram and then seeing almost every these big media publications literally putting like Vogue and New York Times just posting a picture of her selfie and saying this woman is missing. And I wasn't really sure. I was like, who is this? Is she a daughter of someone famous? I had no idea who she was. And I wasn't really sure why was it that she was getting so much coverage versus these Black and brown girls that I see go missing almost every week, that my friends that I know from my hometown reposting making their own missing flyers and things like that. But then this girl who's basically the same as them getting so much coverage.
And I would just thank you for that, by the way. And I just want to put out the statistic that some of you guys might find I know surprising or maybe expected, that there's an estimated amount of 64,000 Black girls are missing in the United States right now. And yeah, when I think about that, I feel like that Guy Petito, she didn't deserve any less attention that she got, but I feel like we need to make this type of attention be across the board for everyone. That's definitely how I feel about the situation. And I'll just introduce this other idea where it's called missing white woman syndrome. And I just wanted to know if you guys heard of it, and do you really truly believe that it exists?
I have heard of missing white woman syndrome. I've actually heard of it most recently, and I definitely believe that it exists, especially after this year. I don't know if you guys are too familiar. I think it was in October. There was a missing Caribbean woman. Her name was Mia Marcano, and I remember on Caribbean social network pages and stuff like that. It would be big on that. And that it will be going around being shared on that. But when I looked at the mainstream media, I didn't see it too much. Unfortunately, she was found dead. I think it was a janitor who worked at her building who had murdered her. And after that, it kind of my perspective on the whole issue had changed, because I was like, wow, this really is a big issue that we have in our media, and our media not reflecting missing women missing people or across the America in general, but more specifically missing colored women.
I agree. Just I think media, especially news organizations, played a big role into the disparity and how I feel like it's the news, especially the news's duty to equally portray, if they're reporting on a missing person, they should equally report on Black women, Indigenous women as they do white women.
And I just feel like what was even more shocking was before the case even all of the information in the case came out, I believe it was Hulu that put out a documentary on Gabby. And I feel like that was really shocking because a Black woman or Latina woman or any other woman of color would not have gotten that coverage, especially that quickly.
Yeah, I feel like I'm just gonna put this piece of information out there that there are 710 missing Indigenous people in Wyoming between the time of 2011 and 2020 and Gabby Petito, that's a 9-year gap. Gabby Petito was found in under 2 weeks. So I feel like that speaks, those numbers speak to how we're just not getting that. And the document, I actually didn't hear about this documentary. It's actually really shocking that within 2 weeks there was, they put out this huge documentary trying to find this woman, and there's so many other women that are just not getting this attention.
Noticed when I was seeing all these posts about her on these huge media publications, she was missing. At that point, she was only missing for 6 days, and she's a grown woman, and I feel like that's a lot. How is she able to or her family, maybe her family has a lot of connections, but how is she able to garner so much coverage? And she's just she's just an average white woman in America. So it just goes to show how and also I don't think there was anything particularly out of the ordinary, and the way that she went missing.
Oh, you mean
she was going on a road trip, I think.
Yeah.
It was normal that she was not around, but then they found out that she was missing, and then so quickly they were able to get so much coverage, whereas it's there's people that go missing and there's proof that they got kidnapped or they were something terrible happened, and there's no help from the police, from the media to try to get them. You know what I mean?
I would just like to ask you guys, now that we talked about that there is a disparity in the coverage, I wanted to ask why is it important that we get this coverage, and what are the dangers that can come to people like us if we're not encouraging or putting this type of coverage out there for people of color.
I think the danger comes in when you find white women's missing or missingness, I'll coin that phrase, their missingness is sensationalized and made into a public spectacle. Like, if y'all, any of y'all know, Dog the Bounty Hunter became part of this investigation. He's a pop culture figure. So it was very much turned into almost like a real life reality show. Like, we know reality shows are supposedly based on real life, but it felt almost scripted, like we were watching it play out day by day. The story that the boyfriend gave didn't add up. You don't go on vacation with your partner and come back without them. That just doesn't happen. The parents seem to be in cahoots with the whole thing because the boyfriend went home and then he left. And just the importance of highlighting more than just these white women missing stories, which have been there since time immemorial. You saw that with the debut of the movie Birth of a Nation, and just the very much like damn near sainthood appointed to white women, and this like purification that was continuously perpetuated, that white women were damsels in distress and they're victims. Even when their perpetrators are white men, they still have this certain kind of sainthood and purity to them that is maintained through the media. So if all you're highlighting are white women missing, you by default erase the humanity and ignore people who aren't white women. You ignore Black women, you ignore Latino women, you ignore indigenous women. Anybody that's not a white woman becomes othered, and they're no longer part of the mainstream narrative. So when they go missing, it almost doesn't matter. Those statistics just exist. There's never a face put to them, and they're not concretized in the mainstream media. So you don't see an overall outpour of support or outrage around their missingness. So when we push for them to be highlighted as well, or at least be introduced to the conversation, we're humanizing each and every one of these victims. And we also validate the fear, the sorrow, and the grief that these families feel when they see their loved ones go missing.
I feel like the whole Gabby Petito thing, like it was reminiscent of like a true crime, like those, like when you see like these people like talking about like these podcasts about true crime, and they're talking about these like Joan Benet Ramsey and like all these other cold cases that never got talked about. And then we're not finding that for people of color, it's usually always white people who are getting like these, you know, these interesting podcasts, and like they're like people are like going back into it, like reopening them, but we're not doing that for missing. Like I remember a few years ago there was this, I can't remember the name, but there was this Black boy that he was found like wrapped up in like a mat in the gym, and we don't know what happened to him. We don't know who did that.
Yep, that story is still quote unquote cold. It's ongoing. It has been unsolved. And a point about the true crime thing, the largest audience and consumers of those podcasts are white women. And these true crime podcasts tend to center white women with white male perpetrators. So even the narrative of victim white woman perpetrating Black male or non-white male isn't something they even push that much in true crime.
I agree with everything Julio just said. And I just want to add on to that, like, because it seems like it kind of erases or dehumanizes like Black and brown girls. It also, like, when it comes to human traffickers, they're more likely to like kidnap or like, yeah, basically kidnap and take advantage of Black and brown girls versus instead of white women, because they know that if they take Black and brown girls, then no one's gonna look for them, essentially. And that's why I feel like it's so important to spread the awareness and like show an equal representation in the media of these missing girls, because they matter too.
Yeah, and I would just say like to spread that awareness, it's like that sensationalization, like the whole entertainment industry kind of aspect towards cases like Gabby Petito. Again, people consume them as podcasts. There were TikTok videos, YouTube videos, all these like mystery centered videos trying to follow the case. I think we need to look at those and ask the people consuming them, like, where is the same attention for Black and brown women? Not just make it, because there is a sad aspect to it that the Gabby Petito case did get sensationalized. It was a tragedy, but all of that attention still, it could have been also directed to question the white woman syndrome, like how that was manifesting throughout the whole thing.
And I just also wanted to bring up like, how often do we hear the stories of missing people of color, you know, in big media, but also the how often you might see it in your own community if there is a difference, and does it even usually make it to like these big media like companies, or like do you might see it at your local news, but do you really see it like being like shared across like the way that Guy Petito got, like how Catherine mentioned, like Vogue celebrities, like do you ever really see it make it to that level? Because I know media coverage, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, like media coverage for like white women is at 51%, and indigenous women are only getting it up to 30%. But yeah, you can continue.
Oh, I was gonna add, like, that's actually very like an interesting point that you make, because now that I noticed, like growing up, I would see on like my local news, I would see they wouldn't even really cover it like during the main like highlights. They'll cover it like during commercial. It'll be like this child is missing, and it'll be like sponsored by like a car company or something like that. It wouldn't get like I would never, now that I recall, I never noticed like national attention for like missing indigenous women, missing Black women, or anything like that. Even in the local news, I feel like there needs to be a better job that is done, because it also is like it can save lives, and it saves lives, and it kind of, there's still a lot of work to be done within like addressing racism, so it also addresses racism as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I see on social media, yeah, like people of specifically like for the Black community, so many people do like repost about like missing, even people that they know, like missing peers, missing young Black girls, missing young Black boys. And so social media has that power. And so I feel like the next step is reaching out to white communities, reaching out to white people on social media. Like you should also be reposting. You should also be spreading awareness, because again, at the end of the day, it is on the news business to spread the message. But like I said, like they work based on an audience. And so culturally, societally, we have to put out the message that we do care. Yeah.
Yeah. So like just to that kind of, you kind of touched upon it a little bit, but like who is to blame for this? Like, should we be blaming ourselves? Should we be blaming the big media? Like, how do you guys feel about that?
I think a lot of the blame has to be on, first, law enforcement, because outside of the actual coverage of the crimes and the kidnappings or the missing people, there's also what's the completion rate on finding these people? Are they just lost indefinitely? Do we ever get to an end of the case where it's okay, a body was found? Okay, we found the person, they've been reunited with their families. What is law enforcement doing to either abate these things so they don't happen? How are they reacting to it? And then how are they connecting with their local media to get the stories out? Because if the crime is committed, it's a missing person, you don't just keep it within the department that you're looking for somebody. You do outreach work. You let the community know, not just rely on the family, hopefully telling the local news station that their uncle or their child is missing. The police should also do a better job of communicating with the news and making sure these stories stay afloat, because it's too easy nowadays for things to happen and we forget about them. We live very much in a timeline society, and stuff is sometimes chronological and sometimes it isn't. So if it happens now and something happens immediately after it, then immediately after it, then immediately after it, I'm going to forget what I saw 2 hours ago. So if we're treating people the same way in the general media, law enforcement has to do a better job of actually handling these crimes. And then once they find somebody, if they find somebody, actually not necessarily advertise, but let that be known. Let that be known. Promote that. So we actually have happy endings, or at least an ending, something conclusive to these stories. And as far as the quote unquote big media, and we know what all of those major networks are. I'm personally a journalist, so I understand like the responsibility that is placed on journalists and these media companies. There's a lot of private interest that goes into those, and there's a lot of hand like a lot of hand washing of certain things. They don't think they're responsible for it. They don't think they should be covering these issues, and they have to think of their demographic and all these other things. So because they're chasing a bottom line, they might not elevate certain stories, and they also want to have that happy story because they can't, or they feel they can't just advertise there are 30,000 missing people on this part of the United States, because a lot of things are doom and gloom, so they don't want to have that be their whole newsreel. But the media could definitely do a much better job of letting us know who is missing, more than just white women.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. Like now that you mentioned it, I'm just like, yeah, like I think it's the FBI to do like missing persons, right? So like, aren't they supposed to like? It's kind of like also their yeah, like yes, we have a responsibility to when we see it, repost it. If we see it in our own communities, like yeah, like we should be able to, we should speak out as well. But if we don't even hear it from the FBI or like whoever's in charge of like making sure that it gets out to media, how are we supposed to, like how are we supposed to share it? How are we supposed to tell other people, hello, there's a young woman missing, we need to find her. There's a young man missing, we need to find him, you know? Well, thank you for that. And I also had this question about, us like we're people of color, like do you sometimes fear for your own safety, like as a college student, as a woman, as a young man, like do you guys feel that like am am I at risk? Like if something ever happens to me, what will someone be looking?
Yeah, I would actually like to touch on that point. So I go to school upstate and it's in a very small town, and the college does not have a good relationship with the police department over there at all. And there's always tension. There's been tension for like years already. And I feel like if I were to go missing, I would not get coverage, just considering that fact that first, this is a majority white town and I'm a woman of color. And I just feel like there's like it's been said, like there's an issue of like police presence when we talk about these issues. So I feel like if the police doesn't have a good relationship with the community, why would I trust them to like, you know, be there when I need help?
I feel the same way just because like I sometimes I think like if I ever were to go missing, other than like my friends and my family, who's gonna go looking for me, because I'm not like a white woman with blonde hair and blue eyes, no one's gonna care, you know. But also just because I'm from New York City and NYPD, I know that it's trash. So honestly, like I just think like if the police aren't gonna do anything, and I know the city's a dangerous place, and like same thing with Stony Brook. About I don't know about like the police department and like this county or whatever, but I just don't feel safe in general just because Stony Brook is like a public campus and anyone just come on this campus and do whatever they want, like, and I know there's like UPD and things like that, but sometimes when I'm walking by myself, like from east side of campus to like the west side of campus, I'm just thinking like anyone can just drive here and just snatch somebody up and you wouldn't know anything, literally.
Thank you. Does anybody else have like anything they want to say about that topic?
Yeah, as a black man, that's a very like heavy, as a person, first off, that's a very heavy existential question. And then as a Black man, funny enough, society is built to fear me. So my tendency or my likelihood even of thinking if I was to go missing, who would look isn't as high as it would be if I was a non-man. And that's just due to the patriarchy. So I have this false sense of security that people aren't really kidnapping men. They are. They very much are. It just isn't as spoken about as women being kidnapped. So when I think about, hey, what if I was to go missing? I know there are certain people, as you said, like loved ones, friends, they'll definitely go looking for me. But outside of that, what obligation does the local police force have to locate and find me? Like, do I trust how they view my community, me as an individual enough to think they would do a good job at finding me? Do I trust they will exhaust every single resource? Do I trust they will prioritize finding me? Do I trust that they're not going to do a little background check, find something, and then start to assassinate my character before they found my body, make things up? And now all of a sudden, oh, he wasn't an angel. He wasn't this. He got detention when he was in high school, and just start to make stuff up to make not finding me okay. Like, do I have to be a squeaky clean human being in order to be worth being found? My neighborhood where I'm from, my zip code, is that going to invalidate the likelihood of me being found? And just so many different things that we shouldn't have to think about, because ideally all humans have a deep enough and simple enough form of empathy where you don't have to be related to somebody in order to care for them. But not everybody functions on empathy without proxy. So
Mhm.
it's hard. It's hard. You can't confidently say, unless you have the resources and access and certain privileges, you can't always confidently believe you would be found. So do I have trust that they would do a good enough job of finding me? I
Yeah.
can't say so. I can't say so. Would I be found? God willing, hopefully, yeah. But let's also, I'd like to try my best not to get lost or snatched up in the first place. But that's not really in my control, is it?
Yeah, it's hard to it is it kind of is like a deeper question than I thought when I asked. But yeah, like I'm thinking about it, I'm just like, yeah, like I know when women get snatched up in my communities, I'm just thinking of like, what is it that the police do right away? They don't look for us right away. They ask, what did you guys argue before? Did she like was she a sex worker? Was she this? Was she good in school? How did she look like? They actually like all these questions and they don't start looking for you right away. Like even if it's been, that 48 hours or however long you're supposed to wait, like, like they don't even then they don't look for you right away.
They almost start building a case to deprioritize finding you. They almost try to find reasons not to immediately start looking for you, especially if you're not someone of status or importance. You're not like the mayor's child or something. They're like, oh, they can afford not to see their loved one for like a day or two. We could put this on the back burner.
Yeah, and then it just becomes a case of like, like maybe she'll come back, maybe she won't. Now it's time to start looking for her body, or something like that. Like that's like how I hear of it like happening. It's like, oh, now it's been this point where we're gonna have to start being realistic. And it's like, well, we could have been realistic in the beginning and start looking for this person right away. Because I know there was this indigenous woman. Again, the names, I'm not great with names and names slips my mind, but she was missing for a really long time. Like I would say it was all within a few, like maybe like a year. And they were finding like they couldn't find her car, and like the brother kept insisting like, oh, like, can we start looking for her her car in the lake, because in that area they're just like there's this huge lake. I think it was Wyoming. And there's like, oh, like look for her car inside the lake, look for her body inside the lake. And it took so long, like a year, just for them to even check, because they were just thinking like, she's fine, she'll come back. But there was so many like so many like I guess, clues that she was taken from, like she was taken, like this was a kidnapping or something. And they found her in the lake, her car in the lake, and she was strapped to the passenger seat. And the time that had passed, it was like there was no evidence left to look to even try to find who did this to her, because clearly the police were trying to insist like, oh, this was a suicide, or she did this on purpose, it was an accident, like a car accident. But like she was strapped into the passenger seat, like something happened, but there was no evidence left. It had been in the water for over a year. So it's just a cold case, and there's nothing. I feel like the waiting is what, like if I thinking about it for myself, just like the waiting is probably the worst part. Like the sense of not, like there's no urgency in those situations. That's what worries me, and that's why I feel like we need to fix this issue. And if anyone has any more to touch upon that, you can. But I also had this last question of like, how can we fix this issue? But yeah, like if you guys have more to talk about that.
Yeah, when I heard you saying that, it made me think about like how these different investigators and stuff, like for example, for like the John Benet Ramsey case, that case has been cold for like so many years, like I think like decades at this point, and they still trying to solve it. And like they're using all this like technology and these different things that they can do to try to find new thing, like I don't know, just to find new discoveries in the case. But then there's things that are happening now with like people of color, but it's like they're not, it's like they're not using that same energy that they're using towards these cold cases, that at this point it's like, it's past, like yes, those cases are still important, but like look what's happening right in front of you now with these people who may not be, white, but their lives still matter too.
To fix the problem, I guess it goes back to getting rid of the narrative that an innocent missing victim looks like a young white girl. Because, and even back to the existential, like, would they go looking for me? It's, you are in the end trying to kind of measure up like how your identity fits in with that narrative. Am I college educated? What's my class? Things like that, that was mentioned before. And it's like, a victim could be anybody, and we have to really accept that. It doesn't matter how they look, their class, their background, what they've done, their character, things like that. Like we have to refuse to, empathize only with one kind of case.
Yeah, I would say that that like what we can do as like just I guess a citizen, or just even like I am a journalism major, but I don't see myself going into the news world like a news journalist. But I think that what we can do is just when we see it, just even if it's like just try to follow these cases. Like we'll repost these, and then it'll be like people who already been found, and it's like a quick search. But I've learned to just like I've developed this habit for myself where I can just, if I see a missing person report, I just quickly Google up their name to see how long ago it happened, if they have been found. And then if they've been found, I just let everyone know on social media, like, hey, like this person actually was found. And like I'll just DM people like, hey, this person that you posted, they were found. Or I'll be like, oh, like their body was found. If that was the case, I'll let them know. Or I'll try to I feel like what we should do, like I feel like what we can do, I feel like it's really going out of our way, but I feel like, yeah, just like see like who is missing in your area. Like there is like websites for that. They're just like, oh, like I've been missing, help find me. Or just anytime someone posts something, I automatically repost it. Even if I have to like write an update later, I'm just reposting like anyone who is missing, because I feel like we'll see a lot of time, like I don't really, there's just certain people on social media, they don't repost these type of things, or they don't really open up about like these type of like situations, or they're just like, oh, it's too like serious, too political for my
It'll mess up their aesthetic.
Yeah.
They can't afford that.
Yeah. So I really only use my social media for things like that. Like to be honest. Like,
Can I?
yeah,
Oh, sorry. You can finish. I didn't want to cut you off.
I'm done. I'm done.
I just wanted to kind of put the disclaimer though, like I think if people are of the community, if they are Black, if they're Indigenous, and there is a case of a Black, Indigenous, Latina person, because I think it can cause like serious anxiety and like frustration, depression, like when you think too much about like this could be me. So I feel for people of those communities who don't feel like they want to,
Post it.
I think that's fine. I think especially for white who get the most privilege, but for white and people not of that community, then there should be that responsibility like, hey, use your platform. But I would also just have the grace for people who don't want to kind of mentally, emotionally go through that. And I'm saying this because I myself get that way sometimes. Like I don't want to
There's certain things like I wouldn't post, like if it's like a video of like a shooting, I don't post things like that because I personally don't like to see things like that. So I don't. I'll post like maybe like because for that those type of things, they just make me like really upset.
yeah, and it
But I'll post like, hey, this person just got shot by police, or like this person just like I think the other day I posted something about like there was this baby. They killed the parents and the baby, like the police officers, and they're not releasing any video. Which, if in case that they did, I wouldn't post the video because a baby got shot. But like, yeah, like I wouldn't post like actual footage or a picture of the situation. I'll let people know.
Yeah, I fully agree with the point Esther just made because last year, my page, all social media was literally nothing but that kind of content. It was just sharing, trying to raise awareness, and just consuming so much of it. I basically went cold turkey after the summer. Like, once the fall hit, I wasn't sharing nothing. I wasn't reposting nothing. I was just trying to recalibrate my mind and again sensitize myself to the horror that is Black death. Like it had become too common for me to see it on my timeline. It had become too easy for me to share and repost it. Each story is heartbreaking. Each story needs to be told, but I felt almost like a custodian of the cause. Like I had to put this out. If I didn't do it, it wasn't going out. If I didn't share it on my timeline, on my story, people weren't going to find out. This person wasn't going to get justice. And I put so much weight on myself as an individual, as if I'm not one of 7 billion people and counting, to get this news out. Like, no, while I'm a journalism major and all of us can be citizen journalists, like all you need is a phone and a camera at this point. It's not my personal responsibility to get this story out. And if I can show up in another capacity, instead of sharing the GoFundMe link, I actually donate. And I'm doing other things that I'm comfortable with, and I'm meeting it halfway or showing up the way I can without impeding on my mental, physical, or emotional health rather, then I think I'm doing enough. It's those who are performative and try to call you out that really get on my nerves, because last year there was a lot of virtue signaling and it got gross. So I didn't want to fall victim to that, because if you become the quote unquote social justice person, it almost seems like that's what people expect from you. And as somebody, as a Black man, I already am on the receiving end of a lot of these quote unquote social justice initiatives in the regard of being the victim of it. Like, I'm usually seeing myself in these bodies that are being shared. I don't need to be the one then resharing and telling you to see me as a human. That's for the next person to do. I don't need to share the horror that is being done and inflicted on my people in order for you to humanize me. That's your problem. So I definitely took a step back. But on the same token, in the instance of missing women and missing people, those stories are for the media to do a better job of covering. The families go through a lot. Us as individuals who consume this media every now and then go through a lot when we see it. We cannot be so hard on ourselves for not then being the vessel that shares it. Of course, if it comes across your timeline, share it if you can, if you want. You might be the person who shares it in the right zip code, and then it catalyzes that person being found. You just might. You don't know it, but you just might. But it is not your job. It is not your duty to do so. And I think that's about it for me.
Yeah.
And I agree with everything you said. And I guess what I would add is like, I think I do think like, yeah, we should advocate to these news publications, but I'm also like a strong believer. So like I'm someone who believes like, where we see where they lack what we can just do for ourselves. Like that's why it's important for like publications, diverse news publications like, like Black World and things like that to exist, because we can just, if we see like, instead of like basically us relying on these giant white news organizations to report on Black and brown women, which they still don't, and I don't think they're going to start anytime soon. I think it's important to have our own news publications that we can rely on and get news from, and stop like getting our news from, I don't know, Fox or Fox, or like even like, I mean, yeah, like it's like, there's like the liberal ones like New York Times and CNN, but but I still think that we should have our own news publication so they will report equally on the people that are missing.
Okay. Thank you guys. If there's anyone else has any like ending points before we finish off our roundtable.
I mean, I definitely did agree with the point that it should be the duty, or not duty, but it should be some sort of responsibility for people who are not in close proximity to certain issues to speak out about it, because like it was said, it gets tiring when you have to constantly advocate for your people. And I feel like as a society, people who may be removed from an issue need to start stepping up for, people who are closely affected by something.
Thank you for that.
Real quick, all
Yeah.
the pressure we put on them, like during 2020 on all these platforms and like corporations, we could bring that back.
Yeah, I feel like that's, if anything, if you don't want to post, I feel like that pressure like that we were feeling like during like that quarantine, and like the fact that we were able to do that like during a pandemic goes to show that it's possible. And especially we didn't even need to do it like in person most of the times, even though a lot of people did, and that was like helpful as well. But like just being on social media and pushing it in people's faces, I feel like that's really helpful. So I feel like not necessarily share everything, but if you feel strongly enough, do it. And I feel like especially for like current missing women or men, I feel like you should definitely share it. Like,
Yeah, there are a lot of different intersections of identities and people that are lost or go missing on a daily basis. So these news media corporations, they need to do a better job of covering them. And also for those of us who know Black and journalists of colors, please familiarize yourself with them, empower them, promote them, because while we as a collective democracy, let's call it small d democracy, people can promote and shout at these corporations, hey, cover this story, cover this story, cover this story. The vessels we can use exist. People like us, so to speak, exist in these corporate media spaces. We need to know who they are and hold them accountable, not to cover it every time, because they're sometimes they're literally two of them in a newsroom of 50. But at least be aware of who they are, watch what they do, and then just help change the narrative, because their voice, while we might see them as so prominent, that's because they've been tokenized. The media does that, society has done that. Thanks, race. And it just makes it very hard for them to do their job to their fullest of their ability, because they might not, as them being the quote unquote token, they might not want to cover every single story based on their community. They want to be able to exist outside of that, but they still have a social responsibility to cover those stories. So if we know these journalists, promote them, support them, endorse them, and then as some of us choose to be journalists, and we might not choose to go into hard news per se, in our own capacity, we can very much cover these stories ourselves and help raise awareness. So it's a very fine line, considering the media, and specifically news media has been one of the strongest arms of white supremacy. They're the same companies that propagated so many of these stereotypes and nasty narratives that we live with today. White women syndrome, missing white women syndrome was born from narratives the media set way back when, centuries ago, and we're still dealing with it today. So as we step into these spaces and we view ourselves in these spaces, we need to be viewing it with nuance, grace, and just the awareness that the space itself is white supremacist from the get-go. We subvert it when we enter it. We subvert it when we introduce new ideas. So let's continue to do that to the best of our ability.
Thank you guys for all coming and sharing your opinions. You can give yourself a round of applause on mute or whatever. I feel like thank you guys for coming. Hopefully we'll have another roundtable talk with Black World in next semester, or I don't know, over winter break through Zoom or something. I hope that we continue this, because this was very, interesting. It's always nice having like these type of conversations, and like for, because sometimes you think these things for yourself, but you don't. I feel like I don't really have these type of conversations like all the time, and I feel like being able to share with our campus community.
Black World back, baby.
Yes, we are. Spread the word, guys. Please.